Story 1. The Whispering Walls. Lena had always loved the quiet of her small apartment. It was her sanctuary until one night when the whispers started. At first, she thought it was the neighbors, but then she realized the voices weren't coming from outside. They were coming from the walls. She pressed her ear against the cold surface and heard a hushed conversation. Words she couldn't quite make out. A man's voice, a woman's voice, arguing, pleading. But there was something unnatural about it, something that made her skin crawl. She knocked on the wall, hoping it was just her imagination. The whispers stopped immediately. The silence was even worse. The next night, the voices returned. This time, they were louder, closer. They were calling her name. Terrified, she contacted her landlord, who dismissed her fears. "No one's lived in the next apartment for years," he said. "It's been abandoned since the last tenant. Well, since she disappeared." That night, as Lena lay in bed, the whispers returned. But this time, they weren't in the walls. They were right next to her ear. Story 2. The Man in the Reflection. Jake had just moved into his new home, an old but charming house that had been vacant for years. He spent the day unpacking, and by nightfall, he was exhausted. He brushed his teeth, glanced at himself in the bathroom mirror, and turned off the light. But as he turned to leave, he caught something, just a flicker of movement in the mirror. He turned the light back on. Nothing, just his reflection staring back at him. Shaking it off as exhaustion, he went to bed. But as he lay there, half asleep, he felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching him. His skin prickled. He sat up and looked towards the mirror across the room. His reflection wasn't in sync. While he was sitting up in bed, the man in the mirror was still lying down, staring at him with a twisted grin. The next morning, the mirror was shattered, but the grin still lingered in the shards. Story 3. The Basement Door. Emily had always been told never to go into the basement. Her grandparents' house was old, and they always said it wasn't safe. But one night, when she was home alone, she heard the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. She turned towards the basement door. It was ajar. Heart pounding, she stepped closer, peering into the darkness. "Hello," she called. No answer. A soft scuttling sound echoed up the stairs. Then, footsteps. She slammed the door shut and locked it, backing away. But then she heard it. A whisper from the other side of the door. "Emily, why did you lock me in?" She never told her grandparents what happened, but she noticed that from that night on, they kept the basement padlocked. And sometimes, when she passed by, she swore she could hear something knocking from the other side. Story 4. The Midnight Lullaby. It started with a song. Every night at exactly midnight, Laura would hear a soft humming outside her bedroom window. A sweet, melodic tune, almost like a lullaby. She lived alone, in an apartment 5 stories up. There was no way someone could be standing outside. At first, she ignored it, but curiosity got the best of her. One night, she peeked through the blinds. There was nothing there, just darkness. But the song didn't stop. The next night, the humming came from inside her apartment. She barely slept, clutching her phone, ready to call for help. But then she heard something worse, a whisper in her ear. "Go to sleep, Laura." She moved out the next day. Story 5. The Thing Under the Bed. Danny had never been afraid of the dark. He had always slept soundly, never believing in ghosts or monsters, until the night he dropped his phone under the bed. Reaching down, his fingers brushed against something cold, something that moved. His heart nearly stopped. Slowly, he turned on his phone's flashlight and pointed it under the bed. 2 eyes stared back at him. He bolted upright, scrambling away. But when he checked again, there was nothing there. The next morning, exhausted but relieved, he convinced himself it had been a bad dream, until he saw the note on his nightstand. "Nice to finally meet you, Danny." He didn't sleep the next night, or the night after that, and every morning there was a new note. "I'll see you soon.